And committee members, we are ready.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address your comments and questions through the chair. This public meeting has been called to satisfy the requirements of the Planning Act and council bylaws. Notice of this meeting has been given by prepaid first-class mail to all persons listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 60 meters, 200 feet of the subject properties. In addition, a public notice sign has been posted on the lands. Agencies commenting on the applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should the application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given an opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and mailing address for the record. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for the conditions will be determined by the committee following the public portion of this hearing. All interested parties are invited to be present. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. There are colored forms on the back table, which you could fill out and leave. We'll pick them up, and we'll make sure that you get copies of the decisions. Any person, corporation, or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for minor variances and within 20 days of the mailing of the decision for consent applications. The hearing panel consists of Sarah Marsh, to my far left, Bill Sheldon, to my immediate left, and I'm Don Cook, the chairman. And why I forget Bill's name, I'll never know. Does any member of the panel have a pecuniary interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in any of the applications being considered at this hearing?
I have none.
None.
And I have none also, Madam Secretary. Madam Secretary, are there any requests for withdrawal or adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there is not.
The first file we're going to deal with tonight is file minor variance application A26-219P. It's concerning a piece of property at 1611C Lookout Street in the town of Pelham. Madam Secretary, will you please read it?
Committee of Adjustment hearing, Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Application for minor variance, file A26-2019P, 1611C Lookout Street. Excerpts from Planning Report. The subject land is located on the east side of Lookout Street, lying north of Marlene Stewart Drive, known municipally as 1611C Lookout Street in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Section 6.1C, maximum accessory building height, to permit a building height of 4.9 meters, whereas the current maximum height permitted is 3.7 meters. To date, the following comments have been received. Public Works, no comments. Building, a building permit is required for the proposed detached garage. Public comments. Objects because the proposed detached garage will look like a wall from our backyard. The proposed rear yard setback is 10.57 meters, which is considerably larger than the 1.2 meter minimum setback requirement. The large rear yard setback would offset most, if not all, impacts typically associated with large building masses. Objects because the proposed detached garage will not be aesthetically pleasing to the Buckley Terrace homes. The proposed location of the detached garage will still benefit from the inclusion of proportioned windows near the top of the wall to ensure privacy is maintained, but yet enhancing the structural aesthetics quality. Suggests moving the detached garage further west. This would help reduce the footprint of the driveway, although the perspective differences as viewed from the Buckley Terrace would be relatively minor given the proposed 10.57 meter setback and existing mature trees present. The granting of this zoning relief will set a precedent for future residential properties to the north may exercise the same entitlement. Planning Act decisions are not precedent setting, and each development is considered on a case-by-case basis. Is the variance minor in nature? The proposed accessory building height of 4.9 meters is minor given the semi-urban context, scale of the neighborhood's rear yards, building location, and steep landscape. The proposed garage would be located 10.57 meters from the rear lot line. This setback is larger than what is required for the dwelling, which enjoys a 10.5 meter height limit. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? The proposed variance is desirable for the use of the land because it will provide enhanced storage and usability of the residential property, enhancing its usability for recreation and livability. Planning staff are of the opinion that there will be no material change in terms of land use desirability. It should also be noted that modest increases in accessory building heights have been very popular requests throughout the town of Pelham in recent years. It is noted that the proposed accessory building is designed well enough to fit into the residential character of the neighborhood and should complement the existing built-in area around it. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The official plan does not speak to building accessories to residential dwellings, but does encourage uses which are compatible with the neighborhood character. There is room for improvement on the proposed attached dwelling by way of improving rear architectural openings and additional tree planting. Regardless, planning staff believe the proposed variance to increase the building height is not foreseen to compromise any policy objectives of the official plan. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The size of the proposed detached garage's height at 4.9 meters is appropriate given the geography and landscape of the subject lands and of the neighboring homes. The proposed location of the accessory building with a large rear yard setback minimizes and offsets the variation in building height by mitigating what would have otherwise been a poor orientation of a building footprint if it were located at the default minimum 1.2 meter rear yard setback. Given the situational context, the added height will not adversely impact the residential nature of the surrounding lots or of the open space areas of the subject land as it complies with the lot coverage regulations and setbacks. Therefore, the variance maintains the intent of the zoning bylaw. Planning staff is of the opinion that the application meets the 4 minor variance tests laid out by the Planning Act. The application is consistent with provincial policies, the regional official plan, and conforms to the general intent of the town's official plan and zoning bylaw. The authorization of the minor variance is not expected to generate negative impacts for adjacent uses or the community at large. Planning staff recommend that application file A26/2019P be approved subject to the following conditions. That all necessary building permits are required prior to construction commencing to the satisfaction of the chief building official. That the applicant shall, within 6 months from the date of the decision or prior to building permit, plant a minimum of 2 medium or large trees between the rear lot line and proposed detached garage. 1 tree shall be located north of and the other south of the existing rear yard tree, which shall remain. The trees shall be equally spaced from the existing tree and their respective side lot lines, while not impacting the drainage swells and to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there owner of the property present? Do you have any comments? Please come forward and have a seat beside Curtis. State your name and your address and
So my name is Rob Bowers at 880 Metler Road, so I presently live. You're asking if I have any comments. The one comment was about the larger paved area. My oldest son is in a wheelchair, and having a larger hard surface is beneficial for him, so he can get around and enjoy being outside. The detached garage is slightly higher for future possibility of a wheelchair accessible van with a little bit higher roof that it can get into the garage, especially during winter months of poor weather. We did try to keep the detached garage further from the setback line as to not to impede views from the neighboring property. As mentioned in the report, standing at the back of the properties, it's highly likely that it would be very visible at all. I know the home to the south property, that roof line is close to 30 feet high and it's barely visible from the lots down below. So that's all I have to say. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Any member of the audience have any comments with regard to this application? If you do, please come forward to the podium and state your name, address, and your comments. Any member, seeing there are no comments from the public, are there any comments or questions from the members of the panel?
Comments or questions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the setback from the easterly property boundary is 10 point something meters? The rear yard?
The current setback, I believe, is 1.2.
Proposed.
But Mr. Bowers is actually building his house 10.57 meters from the property line.
Right.
So he's actually exceeding the setback currently allowed in, the minimum setback allowed in the bylaw.
Based on that site plan, everything south of the house heading east is concrete or asphalt?
Not everything, no, just, you can kind of see that one line to the edge of the garage. So that would be a driveway coming back, correct?
But then the hard surface continues?
Continues to the rear detached garage, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And the line with the arrows on the south property boundary, what does that represent?
That would be on the south.
Along the
That would
south
be-
boundary?
That would be the drainage.
What, can you explain that for us?
Well, the grading, which was done by Upper Canada, would, the rain, I guess, rainfall would drain, it's hard to see, but just in front of the detached garage is, I guess, the high point. So anything in front of the detached garage would drain towards Lookout Street, so draining west. And then anything from that high point, which would be just in front of that detached garage, would be draining east around the back of the detached garage. And at that point, there'll be a swale. You can see the arrows. Then a large, I'm not sure if it's 6-inch Big O. Upper Canada has done this with the developer, Steve Kaiser. There are 5 other lots, and they're all going to be connected. And the water will then drain towards the Lookout reservoir. Or not Lookout, sorry, the retention pond over on Lookout, the Lookout subdivision.
Is that infrastructure in place?
I'd have to ask Upper Canada and Steve Kaiser, who's not here today, but I'm pretty sure it has been put in place. I already have a permit for the home, that's been passed. And it had to be, that had to be put in place, I guess, when I had the permit of the home. So the home has been passed, I've got the permits.
How does the water off all that hard surface enter that drain?
I'm sorry?
How does the water draining off all your hard surfaces, how does it enter that drainage system?
Well, it is sloped so that it would go towards the arrows, and then the arrows, so most of the entire driveway will flow south to that low spot, and then the arrows all the way down to Lookout.
Those arrows, is that an open drain or is it buried?
That will be buried.
Are there catch basins on site?
I would have to check.
The north-south swale, is it dug?
It'll be a trench with gravel and a large 6-inch, or I'm pretty sure it was a 6-inch tile we put in there.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the addition of 2 medium or large caliper trees, through you to the staff, what is a medium or large caliper? And is it anticipated that those trees be deciduous or coniferous?
For me?
Through the chair, it's not identified whether they be deciduous or coniferous. It doesn't really matter in our opinion, but medium to large caliper trees, like I don't know what the threshold is, but I know the town has a tree planting list for boulevard trees, and they are distinguished on their size, as they are in most other municipalities. But I don't imagine it would be incredibly rigid, the difference between a small and medium large size tree. The point is the tree is there to break up the hard surface of the wall, more or less.
And I would suggest, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, to the staff, that it does make a difference whether those trees are coniferous or deciduous. A coniferous tree is green 12 months out of the year and acts as a shield. A deciduous tree loses its leaves and becomes see-through in the winter. By virtue of the fact that you've defined a caliper, by definition, that's a coniferous tree.
No.
Deciduous trees are defined by height. Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would like that specified and/or the clause changed to include a landscape plan, even if it's only for 2 trees. I think that should be defined and put into writing. I'm very concerned about this drainage situation in terms of it not being defined, and I don't see any conditions regarding additional drainage information being registered as a condition of approval.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, I do understand from Public Works that they do request drainage plans at issuance of building permits. So I do believe that Public Works, the director, does sign off on those. Public Works did not make that as a condition on this application, perhaps because they will have that plan at a later point in time during the development, if that's helpful.
Okay, may I make a couple of comments? First of all, the application that we're looking at came with what was called a preliminary drainage area plan, prepared by Upper Canada Consultants and Mr. Jason Schooley. What I have noticed after I went on a site review a couple of days ago, I met up with Mr. Bowers, we looked at the property. Currently, the easterly property line seems to be quite as high, and the land seems to flow westerly toward Lookout Street. Looking at this preliminary drainage area plan, I get the impression that some of the water that's being created off this lot is going to flow easterly to the easterly property line to that very large drop-off, which the houses on Buckley terrace back onto. With that being said, and seeing that this garage basically is the new part of, I would like to have as a condition that a final drainage area plan be prepared such that drainage from the property flows and remains on the property as per town's standards, which means a revised drainage area plan be approved by the Director of Public Works prior to the issuance of the building permit for the garage.
Mr. Chairman, if this draining, as indicated on this drawing, actually goes across south to north, 5 properties, should there not be a common maintenance easement agreement or something of that nature, starting with this property, that if that drain fails and starts to cause issues of released drain water to the Buckley Terrace properties, that something can be done?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Maybe, well, I think we have a number of questions that need to be answered on this particular file. Drainage being one of them. Secondly, the conditions of the trees. We might defer making a decision on this application until such time as we can get clarification on the 2 matters that have been brought up.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak? Just with regards to the building itself, we were talking about the trees first there. I've been working for Willowbrook Nurseries, wholesale nursery in Fenwick for a few decades now. And I would recommend planting a few evergreens like Mr. Sheldon mentioned a little while ago, because they're coniferous. They're going to give privacy and block that wall year round. So I can definitely have that done. I sell those trees wholesale. And I can look after making sure that gets done.
Are you willing to submit a landscape plan?
Do you need a landscape plan? I'm just asking if we have it in the records here that,
You are in the business,
yes?
then a landscape plan from Willowbrook is probably
I can easily,
acceptable.
okay, I can draw something up,
It
yes.
goes a little further than what we're talking about here. You have
Yep.
already agreed that the trees should be coniferous,
Correct,
and you have intimated that you would be willing to accept more than 2.
absolutely.
All right, so.
And I wouldn't want to put deciduous, because fall time, the foliage is all going to blow into the neighbor's rear
Okay.
yard, and that's not,
So we've got that settled. If you agree to that.
yes, I can do that. I can draw that up.
All right, so that's a condition, Mr. Chairman, as agreed to by the
That condition regarding the
The
trees and tree planting will be
this-
satisfied prior to the issuance of building.
This drainage thing is starting to bother me.
So apparently there has been a provision for the drainage at the rear lots, that they do connect all 6 lots, that there was an easement to the stormwater pond, to the lookout stormwater pond, and that the grading has been approved. I'm just stating what I've been
hear
told.
you.
And that the home permit has been granted. I have that.
No. My concern is that it's incomplete. I
Okay,
think the idea is sound. The execution, the potential execution, is lacking. If lot number 4, the drain collapses, and this water backs up into your yard and goes down into Buckley Terrace, my question, and it should be their question, who's responsible?
right.
There's no easement, there's no maintenance agreement, there's no commonality, there's no common provision that somebody can enter on somebody's property for the purposes of maintenance and repair. so that when the stuff starts to hit the fan and everybody goes, not my job, and these people start getting waterfalls down these retaining walls, I don't want to be sitting here saying I had a part of it.
Right.
So I'm thinking, Mr. Chairman,
I'm
that
thinking,
that's
Mr. Chairman,
significant enough
Yeah,
to,
I think we should, my own personal belief is I think we should have the engineering department upstairs have another look at this and give us what is going to happen
and how it's going to
and how
happen.
it's going to happen.
I would,
Can I have somebody move? for deferral?
I would move that, the deferral based on the drainage issue, on the understanding that the gentleman would not have to pay a refiling fee,
Correct.
and that the details that we're looking at and sound engineering principles be applied to this. I'm sorry, sir, this is not, you are opening yourself to some very serious situations here. All that hard surfacing, driving into this drain, I have no idea whether a 6-inch drain is big enough. I have no idea whether a big O is going to survive. I have no idea if there's a blockage, how these people are going to be protected,
Or someone else.
or someone else.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make sure I have that, been moved on the floor by Member Sheldon to have a deferral, and the reasoning behind that is to find out more information on the drainage?
No,
Yeah,
to
find out more-
define.
Okay, find out more information on the drainage issue from the Director of Public Works and Engineering. What is being proposed, how it's being proposed, and secondly, to contain no water to flow to the easterly property line.
Those are the principles, but
Those are the
then,
principles.
then we are involved with maintenance agreements.
Let's leave that, if the town decides that they're going to go for an easement, then the maintenance agreement is already there.
Mr. Chairman?
And right now, we don't know this.
We don't. That's a
That's
fair,
why-
that's a
why-
fair comment.
That's the question.
That's a fair comment. Yes.
So my question, would it be all right to approve the minor variance, but no permit accepted until you're satisfied with the drainage? Because
Through you, Mr. Chair, you would have the ability to add a condition that a drainage plan be submitted that will not negatively affect
Properties
the
to the east.
properties, and that would be approved by the Director of Public Works as a condition. I also have down here that you would like a condition for landscaping plans for the coniferous trees, that you could grant the minor variance with those conditions.
We could do that. Put it on the Director of Engineering to. We have to trust. We're here to support staff,
No, I hear you. I hear you.
to make their life, to help this gentleman get his variance, and make sure the town's interests and infrastructure are.
Well, the town's interests and these people's interests. I mean, this has gone beyond, this has the potential of going beyond this piece of property. I think this gentleman understands that. And he could be the subject of lots of problems down the road if this isn't resolved. He's putting himself, because the other 5 lots, have they been sold?
From what I understand, 4 of the other 5 are sold.
So, all right, Mr. Chairman, I'll accept that as an amendment, that we put our faith in the town engineer and that this be resolved prior to the issuance of a building permit. So I would move that, subject to those conditions, this application be approved. On the following reasons. The variance is minor in nature. General purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate use of the land and it will provide enhanced storage. This application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. The Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments, agrees with the minor variance report, analysis, and recommendation this application meet the Planning Act tests for the minor variance. In addition to those conditions listed, we add
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have that you would like to have a landscape plan showing coniferous trees to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works, and that you would also like to have a drainage plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works.
drainage plan and maintenance agreement.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a maintenance agreement may be a difficult condition because the applicant may not have the ability to make his
True,
neighbors.
forget it, moving on. I accept your amendments.
I want the drainage area plan also to basically reinforce that no land drainage will be sent easterly. To the easterly property line needs to be High Point. Basically.
It is now, so.
Sorry.
It is now.
It is now, that's what I mean, and based on the preliminary drainage area plan that you and I both looked at,
Right.
we had the same, why are we doing this? So,
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, you're asking that the current drainage plan then be revised with a new plan that would then be submitted to the
Okay.
town?
as part of the application, we received a preliminary drainage area plan. And it would appear, based on the elevation shown on the plan, drainage will be proceeding beyond the easterly property line. And this is what we're trying to eliminate. We don't want drainage from Mr. Bauer's property impacting the residents to the east.
Okay, so not to impact negatively the properties to
To the east, yes. Maybe that's the best way of stating it.
Okay, not negatively
Basically,
Impact.
drainage should not impact
property
uh,
to east.
to the east.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do have that noted, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from members of the panel? Sandra?
Chair, should we also not make a small amendment to that last statement? Not just the properties to the east, it shouldn't negatively affect any other properties? Or are we going to, because we're gonna have the water flow go north towards the retention pond?
I don't know what the town policy is on this. We do know one thing, that particular area of the town, the soil is very sandy, and that's why Lookout Golf Course never has a problem the day after the rain. I guess my fear is, with climate change and everything else, we're getting these torrential downpours. And we have Mr. Brower's driveways. There's a lot of paved area in that property, which I can see it has to go somewhere. I don't want to see the swale usurped or overflowed and affect the properties to the east. I guess that's really where I'm coming from.
And through the chair, I'm also worried about the other properties
The other
further
properties,
north.
yeah, to the north and the south,
Exactly.
yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is, I understand, the town's standard not to negatively affect any properties and not able to rely on other properties for your drainage. I would imagine the Director of Public Works will be considering that when reviewing and approving the drainage plan.
And that's why we're including to the status drainage area plan finalized subject to the, prior to the issuance of the building permit for the proposed detached garage, a revised drainage area plan be prepared. And that's the way it started off, and away we go. Do we have a mover and a seconder for the, we have a mover?
Yep.
Do I have a seconder? Senator Marsh, all in favor? Carried. Mr. Brower, sorry for the long delay in reaching this decision, but I hope it's, you should be able to hopefully proceed. You've got 20 days to work on the drainage part of it before the variances can be officially granted.
When could I get a report of that, just to get started on that? When could I get a report to get started on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will be sending the notices of decision. I do have your email address. I will send that to you. You should have that by the end of the week.
Thank you.
Then you can proceed further.
Right.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The second application we are dealing with tonight is application A27, minor variance, 997 Canberra Road. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to the application? The owner here.
Well, I'm a buyer, but Craig here from Upper Canada is representing.
Would you like me to read the planning?
Well, just hang on. Are you going to? Are you going to please join us beside Curtis? State your name and your involvement with this application.
My name is Craig Rowe. I'm a senior planner with Upper Canada Consultants and the agent for Mr. Jonathan Sinke. He's the prospective buyer of the property.
Okay. Madam Secretary, you want to read the excerpts from the planning report? Curtis is going to man the.
Thank you. Application for minor variance, file A27/2019 P, 997 Canberra Road. Excerpts from planning report. The subject land is located on the north side of Canberra Road, lying east of Victoria Avenue, known municipally as 997 Canberra Road in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Section 6.14A, whereas no dwelling on any adjacent lot shall be located within 300 meters of a livestock operation to reduce the minimum distance separation to 201 meters of any livestock operation. The variance is requested to facilitate the construction of a single detached dwelling on an existing lot of record. To date, the following comments have been received. Public Works. A driveway entrance and culvert permit is required prior to building permit. Building. All necessary permits are required prior to construction commencing. Niagara Region. No objections. Public comments. Objects to the relief of the MDS requirement because the bylaw was enacted to protect the business of farming and nearby residents from noise and odor. Staff agree, although the MDS policy of the provincial deals specifically with nuisance via unpleasant odor and not necessarily normal farm practices as defined in Farming and Food Production Protection Act, 1998. That is conducted in a manner consistent with proper and accessible customs and standards as established and followed by similar agricultural operations under similar circumstances. The parcel is also an existing lot of record, and no one single detached dwelling is a permitted use, as the lands were zoned to permit this as of December 16, 2004. The current or future owners may complain about proximity to poultry barn and or odor originating from the facility. Town staff are proposing the owner enter into a development agreement with the town to be registered on title, which will address driveway, building location matters, and various warning clauses, such as those related to livestock facility proximity and to the potential of experiencing unpleasant odors, etc. This agreement runs with the land, so the future owners will also be made aware of these conditions and clauses prior to closing. Concern about future land value of their property, which contain the poultry barn, in the event of a prospective purchaser wishes to expand the poultry operation, they will be restricted in doing so. This is true. All new expanding livestock operations are required to comply with the MDS policies of the Provincial Policy Statement, Greenbelt Plan, Regional Official Plan, the Pelham Official Plan, and Pelham zoning bylaws. All new livestock developments are required to undergo the MDS 2 formula calculation. However, there already exists at least 5 other neighboring residential dwellings within the 300-meter radius. Thus, the proposed dwelling alone is not the trigger for similar future zoning relief on a particular poultry barn expansion. Is the variance minor in nature? Reducing the MDS requirement is minor overall given the lack of nuisance complaints from other existing dwellings in close proximity to the east and the prevailing westerly winds directing odor from nearby livestock operation to the east. The variance is also minor overall because it maintains the calculated MDS 1 setback as determined by OMAFRA based on variable metrics and not just an arbitrary baseline setback lacking calibration. Furthermore, given the presence of other nearby residential uses which predate the zoning bylaw and are located within the MDS radar, no negative impacts are anticipated. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? The variance would be desirable as it would provide for the development of a single detached dwelling for which the lot was legally created and is large enough that future agricultural production or development is feasible. It is noted that the lot is currently being farmed for what appears to be cash crops. The proposed dwelling would not compromise the large balance of the subject lands to continue to be farmed for agricultural purposes. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The variance maintains the general intent of the official plan because it would permit the construction of a single detached dwelling, which is permitted use on existing lots of record provided they were zoned for such as of December 16, 2004 under policy B2.2.2. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? Reducing the MDS requirement to 201 meters from the required 300 meters does not compromise the intent of the zoning bylaw because sufficient separation is maintained between the existing and proposed use. Paired with a prevailing westerly wind and the lack of odor nuisance complaints, there has not been an issue with the neighboring residents to the east, also within closer proximity to the existing livestock operation. The proposed dwelling still complies with the calculated MDS1 formula in accordance with provincial policy and section 6.14 of the zoning bylaw. Planning staff is of the opinion that the application meets the 4 minor variance tests laid out by the Planning Act. The application is consistent with provincial policies, the regional official plan, and conforms to the general intent of the Pelham official plan and zoning bylaw. The authorization of the minor variance is not expected to generate negative impacts for adjacent uses or to the community at large. Planning staff recommend that application file A27/2019P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant obtain approval from the Niagara Region Septic System Division for septic system compliance prior to building permit application. The applicant shall enter into a development agreement with the town for the purposes of developing the lot to include obtaining an entrance permits from the Public Works Department for the initialization of a driveway culvert as applicable in accordance with town standards, an owner warning clause specifying that the owner acknowledges that their property is located within a 300-meter baseline minimum distance separation requirement in the town's zoning bylaw, and that they may potentially from time to time experience unpleasant odors from an existing adjacent livestock operation. That an owner warning clause state, should deeply buried archaeological remains, resources be found on the property during construction activities, the Heritage Operation Unit of the Ontario Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, and the owner's archaeological consultant shall be notified immediately. In the event that human remains are encountered during construction, the owner shall also immediately notify the police or coroner and the Register of Cemeteries of the Ministry of Small Businesses and Consumer Services. Restrictive covenants that the attached garage shall forever be prohibited from being converted into residential living space due to its location within the calculated MDS radius, and that all necessary building permits be obtained prior to construction commencing.
And with that, thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Rowe, do you have any comments regarding the planning report or what we've?
We agree with the analysis provided in the report. Generally, there's the 300-meter baseline for MDS, and through the minor variance process, you're allowed to reduce it. We did the calculation; it comes out to 201. A dwelling's allowed on existing lot of record. We're just kind of penned in the corner there. So we wanted to demonstrate that we're still getting as far away as possible from that barn, but realistically, even with the 201, that's our only developable area. So. Mr. Sinke would like to buy the property, and we're working with the current owners right now, but we need the guarantee that he could go ahead and construct a dwelling.
Are there any members of the public have anything you wish to say?
I have some.
Could you please come to the podium and speak into the microphone and state your name and your address, please.
Hi there, I'm Cynthia Kamen. I live at 1029 Canberra, but we also own 1021 Canberra, which is a big piece adjacent to this property. Now, we go to Victoria, and I'm concerned about future development on this property. You're concerned about the chicken farm that's already there, right? Is that what this is all about? Is that poultry farm?
This is related to the variance that allows the building to be built within the 300-meter.
And it's just a house and a
Yeah.
garage that's being
If,
built?
if I may, Mr. Chair, the hatched area on the diagram, that is the only place we can legally build a house. So we can't develop the rest of this property any, you
Can't, there was,
can put an accessory structure on it, like a barn or something, but no housing.
okay, because I'm concerned about anything that will affect us in the future, because if there's any existing buildings that may adversely affect this gentleman who may be buying that property, because we're planning a farmer's market to do stalls and things like that there, but I'm going to school right now to learn different things, to see what avenue we're taking. And I just want to make sure this isn't going to affect future plans for us with our 1021, because we have such a piece that's adjacent to this other property.
Mr. Thompson, do you have any, can you,
Through the chair, that's a loaded question, if it would have impacted. I mean,
I'm just concerned, because I know his dad's a builder.
yeah.
So we found out with UFD that they make one little adjustment and then another one comes. So we've kind of been through this before, and we were negatively impacted by a change that UFD made. Now, I know it's not specifically in regards to this, and I just want to make it known, I do have concerns, because we're not sure what we're doing with that property. We bought it for retirement.
I think this currently goes beyond what this committee can actually do. We can only look at the variance that's in front of us, and the variance that's being brought to us right now is a reduction in the setback from 300 meters to 201 meters from the existing agricultural operation to the east.
Okay, so it's only for this.
We have nothing to do with future development on the piece of property that's currently
So
being
this
looked
is
at.
only specific for that piece. I'm
Yeah.
just worried about a zoning being changed for the whole property, and then it affects us later.
That's totally beyond this committee.
Okay.
That's something that would have to go through council,
Okay,
and there is an entirely different process to have a zoning bylaw put through. Curtis, maybe you can help me on this. I'm a little,
Through the chair, yeah, you're right. Like, if it was a zoning bylaw amendment, it would be a totally independent process that would go through council. It is a public process under the Planning Act, so you two would also be notified if there was a zoning application, as would residences or properties within 120 meters. At this point, I mean, there's literally no other information we would have, because they're proposing building a house, as they've shown on the site plan. So it's really hard to answer that question, because I mean, we don't know, is the short answer.
but this isn't for the whole piece, just specifically for this house and the garage.
Yeah, as the site plan illustrates, that would be attached to this granted approval
Okay,
on this
this
variance.
isn't a normal thing for me, so I'm sorry if I'm coming across as, I'm very uneducated in this area, so I just want to make sure we're protected, because we have other issues going on with another piece we have 30 acres there, and there's issues.
so like I say, right, tonight, we're dealing with a variance to the town's existing zoning bylaw.
Okay.
And it's related to
Specifically, just the house
specifically
and the garage.
the reduction in the setback that a building can be relative to an existing livestock operation. And Upper Canada has been retained by the prospective owner, and they're following the Ministry of Agriculture and Food guidelines from what I can read. It is an existing lot of record. It's not If this were a new lot, that might be something entirely different.
Okay.
But this is an existing lot of record. It may be 20 acres, but it's still an existing lot of record.
Okay. Thank you.
Did I kind of help you?
Yes, no, I'm good, thank you.
I'm Hank Fenema. We have property 971 Canberra Road. There's the chicken barn on it.
Yes? I guess this is
I
the
think
chicken
it's-
barn that we're talking about.
Yeah. Just, first of all, I was wondering why the garage has to be even more in. We were actually all wondering also that from 300 meters to 200 meters, just a stroke of the pen could change that, and that was kind of a surprise to us. But come back to the odor. When we spread the manure on the field, we had a phone call and said, "Can you spread it when the wind comes from another direction?" And you can't do that with this chicken farm because there is a set time for chickens going in and out.
I think,
And I would say, if I may, that a future owner would sign for that, like, you know, that he has no objection to the owner, period.
okay, I think the answer to your question is, okay, this is an existing lot of record. And what we're proposing is one of the conditions, that the owner, whoever buys that piece of property, there's going to be a clause in the deed that says the owner acknowledges, whoever that owner is, that their property is located within 300-meter baseline minimum distance separation spatial requirement of town zoning bylaw, and they may potentially, from time to time, experience unpleasant odors from an existing adjacent livestock operation. So whoever is buying the property or the house after this gentleman builds it, the deed that they buy says, guess what? You're within 200 meters of a livestock operation which has been there longer than the lot.
Yeah.
And
I realize.
I ran into the same problem. I used to live in Vineland, and we had a guy that likes to have sheep manure put on his grapery, and yes, for 2 days it would stink, but it was a normal farming operation. And this is what I think they're trying to do. Curtis, if I'm wrong, trying to protect the farmer from this type of nuisance complaint.
My
So
concern.
I hope that I've,
And we have nothing against neighbors, but just one phone call can. get
good
a
neighbors
lot
are
of
hard to
arguments.
find, is what you're saying?
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the public? I see, yes.
I'm Helen, but I'd like to know what the plan is to do with the land, because it depends too, like, if they use a lot of water, it drains our land, like, for crops. So,
I can answer that.
Yes, please, sir. Please come up and name and address.
So my name's Jonathan Sinke. I currently live just on Victoria Avenue, right around the corner from this property. Our hope is to build a single detached dwelling in the corner as located on this map, with the attached garage. There's no plan of building anything more than that. There's not going to be more houses, just the one single dwelling on that property. And the rest of the land will still be used for farming. We'd like to rent it out to the farmer if possible. So it'll just be that one house in the corner.
Does that help answer your question?
because like, it has nothing to do with this, but there's a nursery across the road from us, and they have, they pump water all night long to put in the pond to water their trees and so on. And they are quite noisy too. If you have a problem with that, you can't open your windows because it's like a freight train. You should really have a building around the pump, a diesel pump. But anyway, that takes a lot of groundwater out of the soil, so of course, we maybe can't object to it, but if you had a tree nursery next door too, they'd be having another pond and draining the water.
Unfortunately, this goes beyond our jurisdiction. Like I say, we're currently looking at the zoning bylaw and a variance to the existing zoning bylaw related to the setback. I think this might be an issue that you may wish to speak to your counselor on.
Yeah, that's just it, you know, you like to know what they're doing next door. You know, if it affects us in a certain way, we don't mind if you become a neighbor. Okay, well then we're all set, I guess.
Any questions from members of the committee?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, reading the planning report, am I interpreting or reading correctly that notwithstanding this application, that the owner of the poultry operation, if he wished to expand, I say notwithstanding this application, he would need to come to the town for at least a minor variance and possibly a zoning change?
Is that for myself? Through the chair, yeah. The zoning bylaw in the same section, I think the paragraph above, refers to expanding and new livestock operations. And under the provincial policy statement, they have to comply with MDS as well. The calculations are different. It's referred to as the MDS 2 calculation. So they would have to perform that calculation, and if it can't comply, then it too would have this as an option to seek relief from the zoning bylaw. Alternatively, it wouldn't be able to happen, just like a new house wouldn't be able to be built if it didn't comply.
So, if this application never happened, they would still have to
Yep.
do that,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
So this application in no way affects their ability to expand.
Yeah, we'd have to look at the setbacks of what the new distance would be, but effectively, yes. Like if there's other residential dwellings there that already exist, then they would be the initial trigger or hindrance.
Which this recognizes that there are other residential dwellings within the 300-meter limit, correct?
My report speaks to that, yes.
So that is an existing condition, that there are other residential uses within the 300 meters, which would trigger some form of amendment
That's
to the bylaw.
through the chair. That's not a condition. That you can't. That's just like an observation. I mean,
That's all I'm making. Because
Yeah.
all I want to make sure is that this application wouldn't be the sole reason why this gentleman and his wife couldn't expand their operation. That there are other mitigating circumstances. Am I correct?
yeah, save and except for the part about the conditions. It's not a condition. But yeah, there are other residential properties which would hinder the expansion.
Correct. That's all I want to know. That even if this doesn't happen, the expansion would require some form of, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That, if it's 201 meters, then, yes, then we would be within the 201 meters. If, let's say, there was a barn put beside the barn that's there now, the existing barn, then we would be, let's say, we'd be so many meters closer. So we would be within the 200 meters, so that would be a problem.
It would be a problem here, but I think what the planning department is saying, if I'm correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are other houses within the 300-meter range.
They've been existing houses.
But if you expand, because they're within the 300-meter, you would have to apply for an amendment either to the zoning bylaw or come before this committee. Even if this wasn't approved, you'd have to do that.
Yes, but I don't know about the other homes on the other side, like.
That's what the planning department's telling me.
Through the chair, section 6.14B deals with variances, or deals with MDS for expanding livestock facilities. And the 300-meter metric only applies to MDS 1 applications of new non-farm uses, but it would still be an MDS calculation. There's just no flat 300-meter baseline. So I'm trying to qualify my statement by saying the numbers might not be the same and the radius might be different, but it would be different because you're adding new livestock, so presumably the number is going to grow. So without knowing any of this information, it's really hard to like pin stuff down. But in principle, an expansion opportunity would already be hindered because there are other houses that are within a relatively similar proximity to the proposed dwelling.
That is the statement I was looking for. So what he's saying is, the existing houses that have been there for a long time are within the 300-meter range. And therefore, notwithstanding the fact that they're there, and they have been there, and you've been there,
Yes.
the Ministry of Agriculture would require some input from the town regarding that. So even if this wasn't approved, you'd still have to go through that process. That's my point.
But we would be, let's say, so many meters closer to that new dwelling. Like now there's more than 200 meters. So,
You would be closer to this dwelling,
yes.
but you would also be closer to other houses that have been there for a long time, is the point.
Well, it depends what side you build, I guess.
Well, if this owner, once the ownership has been established, has signed off that says they understand that there is a poultry operation within 200 meters, that there will be agricultural odors, and this is registered against title, it would soften their approach tremendously to objecting to your expansion, because they've already acknowledged that chicken poop stinks. Put it simply. Okay?
Okay.
So this guy was probably not going to be your problem if you wish to expand.
No, it's the furthest, it would be the furthest
Well, we can't,
distance, yes.
that we can't control. Thank you, Curtis.
Are there any other questions, members of the committee? Are we ready to render a decision on this application?
Do we have a motion?
I need a motion.
I can make a motion. Application file A27/2019 P997 Canberra Road, Pelham. Application for relief of section 6.14A, new development in or adjacent to an agricultural A zone or special rural SR zone to permit a reduction in the minimum distance separation. One formula to facilitate construction of a dwelling within 201 meters of a livestock or poultry operation, whereas the bylaw requires a 300-meter setback is hereby approved for the following reasons. The variance is minor in nature overall, given the lack of nuisance complaints with other existing dwellings in close proximity to the east and the prevailing westerly winds directing odor from the nearby livestock operation to the east. The general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development and/or use of the land, as it would provide for the development of a single detached dwelling. This application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. The Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meets the planning test for minor variance, subject to the following conditions: that all necessary building permits are required prior to construction commencing to the satisfaction of the chief building official of the town of Pelham. Obtain approval from the Niagara Region Private Sewage System Division for septic system compliance prior to the building permit application. The applicant shall enter into a development agreement with the town of Pelham for the purposes of developing the lot to include: A, obtaining an entrance permit from the Public Works Department for the installation of a driveway/culvert as applicable in accordance with town standards. B, an owner warning clause specifying that the owner acknowledges that the property is located within 300-meter baseline minimum distance separation spatial requirement in the town zoning bylaw, and that they may potentially, from time to time, experience unpleasant odors from an existing adjacent livestock operation. An owner warning clause stating that should deeply buried archaeological remains, resources be found on the property during construction activities, the Heritage Operations Unit of the Ontario Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport and the owner's archaeological consultant shall be notified immediately. In the event that human remains are encountered during construction, the owner shall also immediately notify the police or coroner and the Registrar of Cemeteries of the Ministry of Small Businesses and Consumer Services. A restrictive covenant that the attached garage shall perpetually be prohibited from being converted into a residential living space due to its location in the calculated MDS radius.
All in favor with the,
We need a seconder, please.
oh, we need a seconder, sorry about that.
Thank you.
No? All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
We have a couple more activities here, members of the panel. We have some minutes to approve. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes of the Tuesday, August 13, 2019 meeting of the Committee of Adjustment? Moved by Sandra Marsh, seconded by Bill Sheldon.
Can I second it?
Yes, you
As the chair, yeah? As the chair of that meeting, can I second?
Yes, you would. Yes,
Yeah.
you
I
would.
can't, because I wasn't at the meeting.
Ah,
All in favor of the approval of the minutes as prepared? Carried. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn?
second.
Moved by Sandra, seconded by Bill. All in favor? Carried.